Can we talk to the dead? Did you hear that clicking? I heard like a thud on the ground. Oh, come on. I felt like I was in a film. It's coincidence. It has to be right. Hello, I'm Darren. I make stuff under the name Haunting the Atom, and this is me in a graveyard. Just recently, I was thinking about collecting some field recordings using old analogue equipment, perhaps with a view to mixing the sounds into some music. I like the idea of peering into the static to see whether I could hear anything creepy, in the style of EVP or electronic voice phenomenon. I was originally going to buy an old tape recorder from the 1970s or 80s on eBay, and then I remembered my micro cassette recorder, or as it's commonly known, a dictaphone. It's a relic from the early 90s, when I'd interview musicians for my old fanzine, and, yes, record the odd gig or two. As I started to play around with it, I thought, actually, why don't I head on down to the cemetery? I really love the older section with all the crumbling graves and the headstones you can hardly read anymore. And if I was going to, in air quotes, talk to the dead, it seemed like a good place to start. I didn't believe it was possible to converse with Victorian and Edwardian ghosts, but I found myself wanting to at least know what it felt like to try. As I left home, I felt some trepidation. I was sure that I wouldn't actually be communicating with the dead, so why did I feel weird about it? Perhaps my belief, or my disbelief rather, wasn't as rock solid as I thought. And in the end, it was this that drove me on. I now wanted to test myself, to find out how I'd feel when I was stood in a graveyard, asking dead people to prove their continued existence. And how would I react if I heard something strange on the recordings? It was time to take the leap. It was mid-afternoon when I entered the cemetery. As soon as I switched on the cassette recorder, I found myself listening more intently, really tuning in to the ambient sounds of the location. The wind, the trees, the birds and other animals, and the crunch of the ground underfoot as I walked. I eventually reached a spot under a tree, just as I planned, near some of the oldest graves, and I stopped still. Perhaps it was the natural reverence I have in graveyards, respect for the dead, but I found myself asking, with apparent sincerity, is there anybody here? Did you hear that clicking? Okay, it isn't an obvious EVP, but as I listened to the recording afterwards at home, it certainly didn't sound like a part of the cemetery's ambience. I'd been running another recording device, an iPhone, as a way to cross-reference any sounds I wasn't sure about on the cassette. And these clicks aren't on that file. I found that quite exciting. I didn't believe I captured the sound of a ghost, but I was thrilled that I was getting to experience some cassette-based weirdness, the very thing that had inspired this experiment. And of course I knew I had to go back to see what else I could capture. And so the next day I returned to the same spot and switched on my cassette recorder. And this is the dictaphone recording. Right, I'm just going to walk a little bit. I'm walking now. Right, this is where I was yesterday. I'm walking a little bit, right. I'm still now. Is anybody here? And at that point I said, oh come on. Actually what I said was a fair bit stronger than that, but you get the idea. I'm fascinated by real life ghost stories. I love the atmosphere and the feelings they inspire in both the storyteller and the listener. However, I believe that uncanny experiences in this field are generally the result of coincidence and misperception. So reality was starting to bend, and I felt like I was in a film, as if someone was writing a script to prove a non-believer wrong. It felt like one of those weird glitches in the Matrix, a glimpse behind the curtain. I mean, this was nonsense, wasn't it? Wasn't it? After I went to bed that night, my mind took flight. As I listened to the settling of the house, my brain started whispering to me, what if something followed you home? I knew I had to return to the cemetery, and so I did. Okay, my third trip was uneventful, but the fourth. On my fourth visit, I decided that I was going to start creating this video. I just filmed a short piece to camera, asking, can we talk to the dead? Just after I'd filmed that last piece to camera, I turned the camera off and I walked a little way on, and then I heard like a thud on the ground, and I looked and thought, what the hell is that? And it was like a headless, I think it's a pigeon. It had presumably just fallen out the tree, but I mean, how? Why? What? I hadn't heard a scrap. There wasn't any fighting. You know, there was no other animals around. At least I didn't hear anything. I don't know, it was like a present to me, I guess. You know, can we talk to the dead? Well, you know, try this for size. It's coincidence. It has to be, right? It has to be coincidence, I guess. So, what was going on? I've no idea about the pigeon. That was weird, but weird things happen all the time, without the aid of anything supernatural. I was in the wrong place at the right time. Or the other way around, I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure I can explain the recording glitches though, and I'll take you through my thought process. One thing I haven't yet told you about the cemetery, and in particular the spot where I was collecting these recordings, is that it's near a tram line. Could the tram's power lines be causing the glitches? It was a possibility, I thought, so I walked over to the other side of the cemetery, away from the tram. I sat down on a bench and started recording. Is there anybody here? There. You heard that right? Oh. That's a dead end. With the trams in the clear, I started to look closer to home. Here are some stats. Over 5 days in September, I recorded just over 89 minutes on the cassette recorder, 34 of which I also recorded on the iPhone. Remember the iPhone? Well done if you did. I seeded it early, so you at least had a chance. All the cassette glitches occurred at times when I was recording in tandem with the iPhone, crucially holding one device in each hand, although I should add that there was no consistency to this, and for most of the runtime of these recordings, there's no interference at all. And what really sells the effect is their timing. Is there anybody there? Cue clicks, cue crackle. It's beautiful. And in case you're thinking, a bit too beautiful, and still wondering whether the iPhone really has anything to do with all this, here's another recording.
I'm at home now, in my office. Would you like me to get you anything from the shop?
Here, after I'd spoken, I moved the iPhone close to the cassette recorder. And yes, it took a few attempts. Like I say, this thing really doesn't like performing to order. It's important to remember that what I've presented here, the spooky glitches, are the hits. These are the bullseyes. What I'm not showing you are the multiple misses. All those times I asked whether anybody was there, with no apparent reply. As is often the case in life, the answer is in the silence. So what have I learnt? I've learned.
But I really love magnetic tape.
Oh, and I suppose there are some sort of life lessons to be taken away too. Can we talk to the dead? Of course we can. In fact, we should. However, if you want to reply, you should look to your heart, as it's unlikely to come through a recording device. I really don't believe I experienced anything paranormal during my investigation, if you can call it an investigation. Although there were points where coincidence worked its magic, and against my better judgment, I felt my perception starting to bend. It's just for brief moments. I was unwittingly writing my own little ghost story. Throughout, I never lost my scepticism, but with every fresh reveal of weirdness, I was surprised, and yes, a little spooked, as I felt my incredulity being challenged. As a fan of the supernatural, a lover of the psychology and the effect, it was a perfect place to be.
Is anybody here?